Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to The Right Opinion, the home of a twat with too much free time. And today we're going to my favourite genre of all, music. Because your boy here, he loves the tunes. It's pretty much what I'm raised on. As I write this script, I'm actually currently listening to Mary's Prayer by Danny Wilson. Wasn't sure about it at first, but I'll say, sophistopop songs do tend to grow on you. Unfortunately, today's topic won't be exactly focusing on my adoration for music. No, today we will be talking about a person called Austin Jones, who decided to take advantage of the clout given by such a blessed industry. However, to open this, I will at least be discussing some media-related elements because music is a unique industry for so many reasons, and it generates so much creative variety that is out there, particularly in the last few years. As the internet has become increasingly prevalent in the distribution of content, we've seen a real wave of music become popular that otherwise wouldn't ever have the chance. There is a lot of music that originates from YouTube. I've spoken about this before, but you have some teen boy, swooshed hair, bent over his acoustic guitar, staring into the camera, singing a sincere song about how much he wants to hold you, and suddenly their subscriber count explodes, regardless of how good the music actually is. But at the same time, you have to give credit to the musical achievements that YouTube has provided. From the early days of Chocolate Rain to repopularizing that weird trollolol song, we haven't seen such a wave of unique music since the early 1990s in many ways. It's just unlike then when we had music blasting onto the scene with great furore. The modern wave has been mostly downbeat and mostly pretty depressing, and therefore it's never felt like a huge shock, more just like a musical cigarette. This is where we introduce the subject of today's video, Austin Jones, the blonde-haired, blue-eyed dreamboat. But no, he's not just a pretty face, he's also a predator. And we're not just talking about allegations here, he's pleaded guilty in court. This is all fairly certain at this point. Austin Jones himself is a 26-year-old musician fresh out of Illinois. He wasn't the most identifiable of personalities, but he was clearly popular enough to amass well over 500,000 subscribers. We don't know the exact amount as his channel was terminated recently following his court case, but it was enough to make him matter. Predominantly, he was a musician who typically focused on covers, original music, and also acapellas, and making a fairly hefty career out of it, which we'll talk about later. However, he also did certain videos that I assume were to create a bond with his audience, most of which are now unfortunately lost to the vaults of time. But nonetheless, I think we can take the remains and put the pieces back together and create some sort of picture and discuss that bond and how he exploited it. Austin started his career in 2007, and although it certainly took a while to gain traction, his continuous run of constant uploads and running off the popular genre paid its dues, and gradually his videos gained traction. This gave him more leverage to experiment with, and at some point he did these acapellas, which were really what bolstered his career, and eventually his content ended up amassing over 33 million views in total, alongside the sub count we discussed earlier. Much in lieu of my other video on the TikTok predator, the Budday, this video will be unpacking some of the build-up, the abuse of power, and the subsequent moves he pulled out to evade backlash and indeed pull an almost unbelievable turnaround after a situation that really could have finished his career. In fact, the only thing that stopped him in the end was the heavy hand of the law. I remember when I first heard about this situation a couple years back in 2017. I wasn't making content that remotely resembled the work I was doing today, but either way, I dismissed him. You know, he's gonna get what he deserves. I'm thankful that actually he's not gonna be around, and to an extent that's true. He was a disgusting twat. But that was not the end of it. No. And now with these new developments, we're about to find out why, and investigate some deeper discussions beyond that. You see, although the attention on him has been widely pursued in the last 2 years, there have been people trying to bring attention to his behavior since 2015. Many of these attempts to no avail at all, with the most being a non-apology in which Austin only demonstrates more of his manipulative tendencies. The years after were not just successful for Austin, they were his most successful. And that's what I find deeply troubling. And I think it's time we understand how exactly that happened and how he loved to abuse his power. So without further ado, I suggest we pursue the curious case of Austin Jones.
The chat continues.
Are you gonna send me the videos now?
And he instructs her, okay, go make it clap super loud and talk about your age the whole time. Got it?
And then that was the point where he was like, how about you maybe twerk for me? Let the fame get to their head that much that they think it's all right to do something. These vulnerable, insecure young girls
Singer and
makes it
YouTube star
so much
Austin
worse than
Jones
it already
charged
is.
with child porn in Chicago. This is some serious shit.
In many ways, what we see with Austin Jones is a classic ascension to power. He is the epitome of a teenage heartthrob in that he represents the sort of lovely, accessible idol who is there for you, who understands how you feel. Now, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on your perspective, as his channel is no longer in existence, we have to take what little archive knowledge we can obtain. But I don't think it's too difficult to completely break down exactly why he found himself in a position of power. Firstly, he was a YouTube OG. He set up his channel in 2007, he was allowed to excel on the platform with less competition, and he was also ahead of the curve in many aspects. YouTube exploded as a platform for actual professional musicians a few years after, and Austin Jones was already there putting up covers. Now, his covers typically did well, appearing to exceed the number of views to the subscribers he had fairly impressively, but as we well know, typically making covers isn't the only way to hold on to the audience you have. But you see, Austin Jones had the looks, and he also had the eye contact, and he also had the choice for songs. What do I mean? Well, let's talk about One Direction, one of the most prolific boy bands of the 2010s. Why were they so successful? Well, because of the young, impressionable teenage girls, but also because of how they marketed to them. Now, one of the things that you become extremely aware of if you've listened to music in a critical fashion was what one would call the second-person perspective. Second-person perspective is focusing on the word you. It's a narrative perspective from your point of view, basically. And One Direction mastered it. What makes you beautiful? Gotta be you. The list goes on and on and on. And the reason that shameless musical executives did this was because the vulnerable, insecure girl loves to be comforted by the cute, charming boy who just wants to make you feel wanted. Oh wait, that's a different twat. I do apologize, there are just so many of them, especially early 2010s. I do not know what we were on, but PG singles about how much boys love you was the in thing. Austin Jones definitely played into that rule, having that sort of song that was addressed to you, the listener, where he would tell you how valued or loved you are. He'd have this cheeky look at the camera, and all you bitches were expected to swoon appropriately. If anything's left, you can have a look at the comment sections on one of his very, very old videos back in the day, and you get the comments that are completely won over. Another one of his videos, Sake of Falling in Love, we can observe the comments.
If you offered me forever, I would take it in a heartbeat.
I love this song. I can kind of relate. You're amazingly talented, and thank you for making this awesome song.
Oh my god, I'm crying because these lyrics explain exactly how I'm feeling. I absolutely love this song. It's so amazing. I hope you become famous and have actual CDs selling. I would definitely buy them.
Oh my god, I just cried. So beautiful.
Totally fell in love with this song, and I really love your voice and your music. Please come to Germany, Austin.
If anyone can guess those YouTubers who voice them, you get a gold star from me, The Right Opinion. Now that is just one page. Of course, not all of these comments are alluding to Austin's looks or his romantic capabilities, but they should show the sort of audience that he was appealing to at this point. The sort of emotional character who cries whenever a blonde boy breathes in their direction. He is very cleverly creating an audience that is vulnerable in of itself, and therefore he can use that to his advantage. And so he did. The sort of thing can be found on his Twitter, or what was his Twitter, because it's no longer there. Well, it is there, but it's someone who clearly hasn't taken advantage of the notion of a parody account. I mean, come on, you can be more creative than that. But anyhow, his Twitter was conducted of firstly putting out vague, sensual tweets that make the impressionable audience think, oh wow, this guy gets me. At the same time, a lot of these tweets tended to focus on his vulnerability or how indebted he was to his fans, and this put him on their level. It makes him seem more relatable or warm to an extent. He owes you his life, guys. Wow, he would do anything for you people. He might not have made it this far if you hadn't bought his albums. At the same time, it guilt trips people who haven't bought the album. It's a good double bind where he ends up favorably in either line of reasoning. The other types of tweets he did were those which heavily relied on the interaction with his fans. Now, there were even less examples of those, but I found one time where his page was archived in 2013, and a high majority of the tweets were what, judging from the format, I believe were quote tweets, in which he would regularly interact with his fans about their purchase or enjoyment of Jones's Jones's content, though I did find this excellent tweet that definitely shows a more flirtive side of Jones, which we are going to witness in a much more aggressive form very soon. So New Tracy writes, just casually bumped into at I am Austin Jones at PacSun, no big deal at all. Austin quaintly replies with, shoulda come into the fitting room with me, smirky face. Now, to be frank, I don't really have a problem with comedic flirting. Hell, I do it all the time with my mates, but at the same time, this is foreshadowing irony that this girl clearly isn't aware of. It's all banter until you realize that there is actually a slightly deeper context. With his new power, Austin became quite aware of who he was appealing to, and one of the other techniques that became quite prominent in his later content was the use of other sizable fan bases. Typically, if you have topics that are relating to someone with more of a cult following, your sort of tribute to them will spill over into an appeal. So for example, if someone did an Ariana Grande or BTS a cappella, they'd probably do very well, although I doubt they make much money because it would be claimed. And so Austin goes for these stans who are either going to want to send you their heart or want to eat yours out, depending on how well you execute your behavior. And this brings us to the final positive but equally depressing point about Austin's appeal. He was actually talented. Terrible people can be incredibly talented, and although Austin's music and covers themselves weren't indicative of anyone with exceptional flair, his a cappella covers definitely were. And I'm not going to play them here because fair use on YouTube is in ruins right now, but I'll leave a link to an archived version, and what he does is quite exceptional, and it would require an incredible amount of concentration and perseverance. There were very few people who could consistently layer themselves doing covers in such a tight fashion and then do it again and again and again. He was creating a brand for himself out of what is now quite a fairly exhausted genre. With success comes power, and with power comes, well, let's find out. Manipulation is the word of the day today, chaps, because what Austin Jones did on YouTube was textbook manipulation of the algorithms to obtain success. Now that is the story of the success of many YouTubers. You observe the trends, you work out how you benefit off of it, and then you embark on the journey to become a successful YouTuber. In the case of Austin Jones, he worked out the audience that he wanted to obtain and subsequently obtain them. The year is 2015, and although not as big as he would be, Austin Jones has successfully manipulated the algorithms into a position of power. However, as foreshadowed, there is a lot more to the story than just the manipulations of the algorithms. When you have an idol who is successful like Austin Jones and you know he's out there being so interactive, it makes you think, oh yeah, I've got this chance with this guy. There's this clip of him at a One Direction / 5 seconds of summer concert. He's being thrown out, and all these girls are screaming his name. Oh my god, it's Austin Jones! He is absolutely reveling in this, and when he builds that relationship, he can then slide into the DMs. And once he gets there, he plays off this sort of good cop, bad cop dynamic. One side of him is incredibly grateful, so lovely and humble, and the other side of him is more primitive, aggressive, and dominative. And what he does is in these confrontations, he tends to mesh these two personas together fairly deftly to try and coerce what he wants from people. So we're going to go trawling through this content and identifying the various techniques he's pulled off. Now there are a load of examples of these, and to go through all of them, well, we'd end up going round in circles. So I want to take one example primarily. This one. A series of texts I found posted by Lauren Miller. I don't know if these are her own, but we can break it down fairly comprehensively in the meantime. And I want you to put yourself in the shoes of the adoring fangirl who is finally having the honor of speaking to their idol, who has already solicited some form of imagery as shown in the text and yet still wants more. So what we see here in this message is the breaking of tone in the conversation, or well, supposed. By saying, let me be honest here, it implies that now he's going to be more sincere than he has before. And then he says, I'm having a really down night. This puts him in a position of vulnerability. We already know he's tweeting about coping with depression, so in this he is using that mental illness to place him in a position requiring support. What is that support? Well, I think I know. But not satisfied with just that, he then puts the fan in a position of exclusivity. You see, he's only chosen to talk to her. How blessed she should be that this huge public figure has gone out of his way for her. So what you have so far is multiple tactics used in the space of a few sentences. You have sincerity, vulnerability, and exclusivity. This pushes pressure onto someone who is probably already desperate to impress their idol, a person who is also rather young and probably rather impressionable. And then with all this in mind, he goes in with the request. And I'm pretty impressed that the girl in this instance said no to him. Now, for some people, no means no. But for Austin, no means the yes that hasn't quite been said yet. He presses again, and then the girl rejects again. And once again, the girl replies very responsibly. At this point, even though this lass has spelled out the exact reasons why she doesn't want to hand over any more content to this predatory creature, he acts confused. He doesn't understand. Pretty much trying to mentally exhaust the person, continuously asking the person to justify their reasoning. Now, explanations in these instances are being built on premises, and what Austin here is trying to do is reach the premises so he can perhaps invalidate them and thus invalidate their reasoning, thus guilt-tripping them into providing him with more content. And she doesn't crack, which fair play. She points out the age gap. He dismisses these 3 points as casually and says, "Oh guys, this is just for fun." Yes, great banter. He then asks if he can offer something in return, and the girl justifiably says that the fact that he is messaging her is more than enough. And I think what should be quite clear now is that this girl is in a vulnerable position, to the point where she still clearly idolizes him in spite of these highly uncomfortable advances. And instead of taking a step back and being able to humanize the situation, Austin Jones pushes on to achieve his only goal. It's the messages after that become a vault to his ever stranger mind. After the girl said that talking to him is an honor, he takes this as chance to once again hold his power over her. He brags he receives thousands of messages, loads of people out there wanting to talk to this world famous Austin Jones. And yet he is talking to her out of everyone. What he is trying to do right now is alienate the person from these objections of inappropriateness. This person has raised the point that she is 14, but Austin isn't targeting her because she's 14. He's targeting her because he was just randomly scrolling through and has decided that the lucky winner of the Austin Jones Luxury Lewd Lotto will be this lovely lass. He just wants to talk to her. Age? What? What's age? I don't know. That's some silly concept. Who cares about age? At the same time, he implicitly degrades the person he's talking to. Despite the fact that he promoted that exclusivity earlier, it was tainted with a tone of disposability. There are thousands of people just like her, and he can just scroll to another DM and find another fangirl who will give him what he needs so desperately. Through this, he creates a contradiction. On one hand, he claims that he can go and get this content from any of his other fans, but at the same time, he is clearly driven to obtain it from this one fangirl, or else he would have just given up on the first try. Maybe that's because he can't obtain content like that from anywhere else, or maybe that's because he just wants to get his way. Given the fact that he did solicit content from other people in the same boat, it might well be both. I think he clearly has some kind of twisted desire to take advantage of this power dynamic that he holds, and fair play to that girl for being able to turn him down, because many people didn't. Manipulation is clearly Austin's middle name, and you can see this in the final few DMs that have been published. The girl asks him, appealing to him on the grounds of human decency, saying that would you do something that you're not comfortable with? Aware that a fan is presenting her perspective, he turns around and says, well, yes, actually, if I wanted to make them happy, thus once again undermining her reasoning, blatantly deceptive and extremely malicious. Oh, and look, he'll twerk too now. How charitable. Basically, what you see here is Jones completely taking advantage of that fan admiration, singling them out in conversation, using that power to intimidate them, and then using various mental techniques to try and coerce what he wants out of them. He's having a hard time. He really needs those twerking videos, guys. He needs them to get through the night. My heart weeps for this poor soul who may never have the twerking videos he needs so desperately. Now, I can't guarantee these DMs are real, but I present the evidence today under the fact that judging by the conviction and the way his language corroborates in various other DMs, that this is extremely credible. What other DMs? Well, there's this one where he was giving another person the exclusive treatment. He wanted to get to know the person through the medium of twerking, and then she says no. Back and forth, same old shtick. He says, obviously you don't want to make me happy, which will obviously cut to the heart of the insecure fan, because having someone pass judgment on your intentions can feel extremely harmful. So once again, he pretty much tries any manipulation tactic under the sun. And I wanted to finish this part on this one clip, just so people know what we were dealing with here.
It's just cause it's for the benefit of both of us, cause like, I'm horny like all the time. So if we just keep talking, I'm probably gonna ask for videos on like a daily basis. And then I'm gonna feel like a dick, and then you guys are gonna reject me, and I'm just gonna feel like shit, so it's just like easier this way. Yeah, sorry I'm a guy. But I still love you.
Yes. So classy. And like any situation, he was called out. And as it started spreading, he started begging all these people in the DMs, oh, please don't do this to me. And as the uproar spread and people got more angered and his fans were turning to him and saying, Austin, what is going on? He decided that he was going to do one thing, and that was set the record straight. Austin Jones is face down with all these very serious situations. He's being hit on all sides, and at the end of June 2015, he decided to do the very smart thing and post a video response.
I'm horny like all the time.
No, not that one. That's too honest to be his quote official response. No, we're going to be talking about this one, namely setting the record straight. Now there's a lot to say about this video, and I'll try and cover it all without being caught up in the too minor things, but once again, what you witness is successor manipulating a situation that really he had no right to. Now it's fair to say that now the video has received overwhelmingly negative feedback. Many people from all over communities banded together to make sure he was shown up. But at the same time, looking at the old ratings, he was doing alright. And Austin wasn't really appealing to any of the people who actually care about internet affairs, but more to his loyals who were going to stick around no matter what. And judging by some statistics that we'll see later, it might just have worked. So let's talk about how Austin Jones set the record straight. He's in this situation, he's up against the wall, he has to hold on to the fans that he has. And he has the main platform to do it. He knows what he's done is pretty terrible, and regardless of the delivery, he's going to come under some fire. So what he firstly does here is present himself as the reasonable mediator. And I want to play you this opening clip because there is so many techniques you can break down in it alone.
Hi guys. I know a lot of you probably have some really harsh and negative opinions towards me right now, and I understand why you do. But I'm asking you to please put those opinions aside for a few minutes and listen to everything I have to say. And if by the end of the video you still have the same opinion, then so be it. But at least you will have your opinion based off of the full story and the truth. I've recently come under some fire on social media for mistakes I've made in the past.
You see, lads, here he plays a very two-sided card. On one hand, he completely understands that people hate him and have those negative opinions, and all he's asking to do is to hear him out. But in his delivery, you'll be able to break down some very slight techniques. Firstly, he implies that people will be receiving the truth from this video when, of course, when there is only one truth and no one is ever going to see the complete truth. There are just testimonies. The closest you're going to get to the truth are the screenshots. And yeah, you're not going to be bringing them out, are you? Another great word he uses is the word mistakes, because although it's an admission of misconduct, mistake is a rather forgiving word, as it implies the person was not acting with necessarily ill intent when they behaved in such a way. So already, although he hasn't actually said anything of substance to respond to the criticism, he has already used a few rhetorical devices to elicit sympathy from his more easily influenced viewers. I now want to play you this excerpt.
I used to ask fans for twerking videos. Yes, twerking, the dance move. It's not something that I'm proud of. It's not something that I think is right. And I shouldn't have done it. This really blew up online when a YouTuber and someone that's very popular on social media somehow found this out and decided to blast it out there. I'm not going to say any names because I've come under attack on social media from my name being spread around, and I don't want to put that on anyone else.
Here we can see a similar mechanism. He apologizes, but simultaneously downplays his crime so people are more forgiving. He asked his fans for twerking videos, you know, twerking, the dance move, like the floss or the Macarena. He obviously fails to mention that many of these fans were underage, and the additional details that we've indulged ourselves with, and we will indulge ourselves with later on. But there is still more in this segment. So he speaks about the YouTuber who has brought this to people's attention. I assume he's referring to D-Fizzy or Damon Fizzy, who was one of the few people to actually call him out in 2015. But he's not going to name names. How courteous of him, because he knows what it's like to have been mercilessly attacked and he doesn't want to do that. But in this instance, this isn't a courtesy. This is a tactic to make sure people aren't seeing any other perspectives and do not know where they are coming from, bar his own, which is also why he has comments turned off. Also notice how he uses aggressive verbs when he describes how these people have dealt with him. They've blasted it out there. It makes the people he's talking about sound more instigatory. We've seen a lot of drama where people have felt the need to play the victim. Austin isn't doing that exactly, but he is implicitly leading people who may be sympathetic of his cause to that exact conclusion. All these people going after poor Austin for his old mistakes, and he's learned from them. He's ashamed, and now they're just blasting it out on the internet.
Since this started online, there are a lot of rumors and a lot of lies. They're just not true. Nothing ever went further.
Now this is a blatant lie, but also one that he could get away with at the time, because at that point the evidence hadn't been widespread and affirmative enough to lead people to different conclusions, so this allowed him to hold that narrative, which although on one side felt like he was admitting something, it wasn't like he could deny it, so it wasn't exactly reasonable on his behalf. There's a load more in between, talking about how he was on tour, how this hit him, and then he plays a victim card, but not in the way that you'd expect.
A lot of people ask, why did the initial statement take so long to get up? I put up a text statement and apology addressing the situation, but it took me about a week to do so. People thought that I was being a coward. People thought that I didn't want to confront the situation. They thought that I was just blowing it off. That's not true. As I said, I was on the road. I was on tour. We were all the way in Boston. So we had to make the drive all the way back from Boston to Chicago. On that drive, the only thing I did was look at my phone and look at all the hate and death threats. I got lost in it. I would read every little comment, every little person telling me to kill myself, every person telling me that life wasn't worth living for me anymore. And I'm a pretty insecure person, to where negative comments like that really impact me. It's not something I can just brush off. And that entire ride home, I read those comments and I began researching different suicide methods. When we got back, I didn't even step foot in my house. My family took me immediately to the hospital, and I was hospitalized for my suicidal tendencies. So no, I wasn't cowering. I wasn't avoiding the situation. I was in a hospital. I had no internet connection. I had no connection to social media, so I couldn't put out a statement. I wanted to. I wanted to apologize. I wanted to confront it immediately, but I couldn't. As soon as I got out of the hospital, the next day, that's when I put it up. So that's why the initial statement took so long to get out.
And this is the thing. In some respects, it's a really obvious victim card to the critical audience. But what he's done here is he's smartly played the point as proxy to the not-so-critical viewer. You see, if we respond to criticism by pointing out the hate we've received, we are often called out for changing the conversation and not confronting the criticism. In this scenario, however, Austin has used the hate he received as a direct response to the criticism. He couldn't do something because of the hate he received, which is still somewhat awkward as an argument, but not as much as it could have been, and serves as a way to convey his victimhood without being a necessarily invalid response. The video is meant to be a response to a lot of the criticism he's received, and it does do that in a way, but it constantly detours down the road of the hard times that he's having as a response. This can be particularly found in the extended anecdote throughout the final part of his video, video where he talks about his life and the struggles that he's experienced, and how that created the mindset that led him to do these fun and goofy things.
The biggest question I get asked is why? Why did this happen? Why did I ask for those things? So in order to figure out why, you have to look at the reasons. And the reasons lie in my past and in what I've experienced through life and how I even got to that point. I experienced death and loss at a very young age. I had an older sister. She passed away when she was 10 years old. I was 6 years old at the time. I went through a series of funerals when I was very young. Most were distant relatives that I either didn't even know at all or I had only seen on a few occasions, but I was so young that I really didn't know who they were. I barely saw my father. My parents divorced at a very, very young age, and the last time I saw him was when I was 8 years old. My father was an alcoholic and a drug addict, and he couldn't get control of his life because of it. When I was 16, a few months before he passed away, my family and I, we went through a house fire. We were away visiting relatives, and somebody broke into our house, stole some things, and burned the entire house down. About a month after my father passed away, my grandfather passed away, and I was very close to my grandfather. After that happened, that's when I began self-harming. I used to cut my wrists, and I'm over 3 years clean of that now. All of these life events, all of these deaths, this loss, left me with a really deep, deep depression, and I was an insecure, depressed guy, and I began searching for attention in the wrong ways. Asking fans for those things. It was because I was desperate for attention. I was desperate for reassurance. I wanted to feel good about myself. At the time, I thought it was just fun and goofy. Like I said, doesn't excuse my actions, doesn't justify it. That's not why I told you all of that. I told you it so that you would understand why I was that desperate, why I was even asking for those things. It was that depression piling up into me searching for attention.
A lot of his evidence of his experiences are things that are completely impossible to verify, which, although plausible, still inspire skepticism with the context of what we now know he has done. For example,
so something else that I want to talk about is people saying that you're only sorry that you got caught. You know, you apologize because you got caught. You don't actually feel sorry. That's so far from the truth. And there are a few actual examples that show that. Before I went on tour.
And he presents these as, quote, actual examples, but they're impossible to completely prove, and yet he presents them as the counter-narrative that he clearly regrets what he did. Every single piece of evidence is circumstantial, but I guess that's good enough for some people. Finally, I want to bring your attention to this clip.
On my last tour, a few months ago, I started going back to therapy for this specific reason, because I regretted it so much, and I couldn't move past it. I couldn't stop thinking about it. I couldn't stop feeling like absolute shit for what I had done. So I went back to therapy before I left for tour. Also, a few months before this became public, I talked to a couple of my co-workers, if you want to call them that, one of which is very popular online. If you're part of this specific music scene, you'd know exactly who he is if I told you who he was. So this is a pretty big, and I'd like to consider, reputable man. I went to him with this. I told him my entire past. I told him that I felt so guilty for this, and that I regret it, and that I wanted to confess all of this in a video. Come clean about it. Just get it off my chest so I can stop living with the guilt and officially apologize to everybody. He told me not to. He told me that it would only hurt my career and what I did wasn't even that bad, and that I should just not even think about it. I just shouldn't do it.
Firstly, he goes the Donald Trump route of talking about how he spoke to a man who was very reputable. Of course, never naming any names, but he's appealing to his authority in this instance. And then he follows it with the fact that this very reputable person actually said, "Whew, demanding twerking videos from fans? That's not bad." And he leans on that authority to justify why he hasn't spoken about it. It's embarrassingly transparent, and it's a real shame that this actually worked. This screenshot is the one taken at the 2017 allegations. There was only one screenshot before then, but it was briefly after he uploaded, which was the classic 301 views mechanism. And as you can see, that like to dislike ratio speaks for itself. People wanted to believe him, and he gave them enough to make them believe him. So we can assume the flood of dislikes came after, and this received insignificant coverage first time around. The people who watched it tended to defend him. So with the people who mattered to him on his side, he was ready to battle on, I guess. Would he turn it around? Well, kinda know the answer, but let's find out anyway. After this video, it's clear that he had rescued enough of his reputation to appease the masses that mattered to him, despite the significant evidence suggesting that he was a less than savory individual. He took a hiatus, waited for many people to forget like they do, you know, wait until people's memory suppresses the severity of what he did. You want to know how long it took people to forget? Go on, take a guess, take a stab in the dark. A year? Half a year? No. 1 month. And these were the ratings on his first actual video back, which clearly had some symbolism. My god, what a poor soul. It's clear in this video he's trying to use the music to convey his victimhood, and in this instance it seems he's the victim of his own twisted urges. Press 1 in the chat if you too shed a tear for the trials and tribulations of Austin Jones, the man who has gone through enough. After this, he decided he was going to release more music, covers and originals. Another one of his videos back was a collaboration with his friends who I'm sure are very grateful to be associated with this specimen, or maybe they knew and the clout was worth it. I don't know. The videos performed okay, but all this was to change when he decided to record a cappella videos. He would do these like 30-40 second shorts of him layered over himself singing, and it was fairly impressive, and it did decently for views. So with this in mind, Austin thought, well, what if I turn these into full songs? And so he did, and the views were insane. Every one of the a cappella videos accumulated over 1 million views. As you can see, what he did was cover songs and albums from bands who had a real cult following, and therefore benefited of a fan base that was probably so committed to their idols that they didn't really think about the possible background of this suspect individual. And to be honest, I wouldn't expect them to. YouTube probably chucked it in their recommended. If I researched every person who I've watched and whose videos I've enjoyed, I'd probably be rather dissatisfied with what I find. And the sad thing is that these videos are actually really good, and it's clear why they did so well. Jones is clearly a highly committed creator who puts a lot of effort into his work, and in this period he experienced some of his most impressive growth. And so it makes sense, but it was still disturbing that so many people subscribed to this guy not having awareness of who they were supporting, and how they may have been in his sights as well. The evidence that people brought forward initially was viewed as insufficient, and the people who acknowledged it similarly dismissed it, and many people began to make up excuses for why his behaviour was acceptable. Well, he apologised. Well, it wasn't a big deal. Oh, guys, is it really worth the drama? Why can't we just get along?
You're merely postponing the inevitable.
This is the problem when people are in denial about their idol. They make up these very questionable explanations to rationalise what they want to like. And that's the most dangerous thing, because you are handing him back power that he desperately does not deserve, the power that enabled him in the first place. When he was first called out in 2015, he was removed from the tours that he was on. This was a huge back and forth in which many people who wanted to stop him had to really push to get him held off. The two tours in question back then were the Grow Wild tour and the Warped tour, which D-Fizzy was on as well, and once again, companies only want to do so much to step in. With enough public pressure, certain places may cave, but at the same time, time, if Austin has enough support or at least lack of criticism from his circle, then he will be welcomed back with open arms. And more importantly, if there are people who are willing to buy his records, there tends to be an amoral record executive willing to sign and distribute his content because they can make some fat stacks as well. And after all, what is morality when there's money involved? The following clip is from D-Fizzy's video in which he reads out emails from companies after he called Austin Jones out for what he was doing. Here is one of them.
My name is blank and I own and operate the blank and blank. I have been promoting concerts for 30 years. I'm not a kid. Besides being a concert promoter, I spend my free time being a part of many organizations aimed at stopping bullies. Internet bullies has led to many suicides, more than most people think, and more than is reported to the news. I am aware of the Austin Jones situation that you have managed to trend since yesterday, and I know this kid personally. I will set aside his issues as he will have to deal with them and his consequences. What I want to deal with is your incredible need to continue to post about this issue. I think you made your point. At this point, you have become an internet troll. What is your ultimate goal? To have this kid kill himself? Is that what you want? You are a bully, the worst kind, an internet bully. You say you just want to look out for other people and warn them. You have accomplished that. I would implore blank to remove you from the tour for being an internet bully. I have counted 46 posts you have made to Twitter in the past 19 hours with thousands and thousands of comments tagging him, just blasting Austin Jones. Unless you want a dead body at your feet, I would ask blank to tell you to stop. And I would ask him to remove you from the tour as you are an embarrassment to his organization.
And that's what happened. Allegedly, D-Fizzy brought this up with Austin Jones' manager, Brian Stars, and he decided that actually it was worth changing the conversation, because when someone brings into question your client's behavior, they bring into question your association with them as well. Now, of course, that is just a testimony, but D-Fizzy's been pretty on the money so far. Not to mention he emailed the manager of the tour, Kevin Lyman, who said he'd look into it. And we all know what that means. And what this led to was a load of ping pong of who was on the tour, who was off the tour, and D-Fizzy got kicked off for a bit, and then he got back on, and then Austin was going to come back on too, and it was completely exhausting.
And then the owner of the tour replied, Damon, I think you are starting to tread on thin ice. Be careful.
Unfortunately, this is what happens when the prospect of removing someone that might affect their ticket sales occurs. And it's only when another outcome that the actual controversy may affect ticket sales and the attendance of other guests comes into account that these people actually paid attention. However, at least he was off the tour, right? Well, unfortunately, as Austin garnered further success and more clout and more power to throw around due to an increasing fan base, it meant that people were going to work with him regardless. And that's one of the greatest problems when you make a terrible person successful. Even if you and 95% of the industry refuse to work with them, the 5% who decide that they can work with them are normally the worst people, and then they make a lot of money, and then before you know it, they might be the ones in the industry with influence. It's a very dangerous cycle. In the instance of Jones, Brian Stars claimed that he had dropped in, but D-Fizzy alleged that he actually has evidence of the contrary, and I wouldn't necessarily doubt him. What that shows is that money talks. Austin Jones was selling his own tours, selling his own music, and no one could stop him. Back in 2015, commentary wasn't really a significant genre, and the videos calling Jones out weren't impactful in a way that they might be today. And commentary is important for this reason, because we're not attached to that industry. And as shown in the D-Fizzy situation, the fact that Austin and Damon were both in that circle, calling Austin out can really affect your career. Having an independent voice is important in those scenarios, and unfortunately it's clear that they were nowhere to be found.
And then fast forward later, the owner of the tour said I would still be on the tour and I wouldn't be kicked off, but then I guess he randomly changed his mind because then he kicked me off the lineup and I had to contact him and be like, why? I had to actually go to his office and beg to be back on the tour. And he had told me that I should apologize to Austin and he set up a phone call. But can we go back to, he had so much potential in his music career, I guess, so people constantly wanted to protect him. The higher up people wanted to protect him, and this is how I was treated. This is the email I received. It says, Damon, are you up for that call Monday with Austin? I spoke to him and he would like this. So they basically wanted me to set up a call with Austin and apologize to him and make amends, but I did not do that, obviously. The only reason why I even went to the meeting to talk to him and try to get back on the tour is because I had already announced to my viewers that I was going to meet them, and I was so excited because I went on the year before and it literally changed my life. And can we talk about like the constant manipulation that he was doing to his fans for years, and it was constantly justified? But the fact that no one took it serious because it wasn't illegal content, it was just twerking, it got to this fucking level. This is recent, this is from May. When I called him out, everyone's like, oh, these screenshots are from 2 years ago, he's changed.
No, the fact that people justified and defended it and like believed his stupid ass bullshit apology, he just got comfortable again and kept doing it. When you have a strong addiction like this to child pornography, it doesn't change overnight. You know what I mean? He continued touring, his career continued growing, and he was continuously able to have access to underage girls. And now, we're left here.
What you have now is a situation where Austin is finding his stride. He's almost immune to criticism, becoming incredibly successful, and his detractors have been silenced. But he's allegedly promised to be better, and explained his mental situation. I mean, if he's genuinely remorseful, he wouldn't do it again, would he? Well, ladies and gentlemen, do I have a surprise for you? People say to me, James, some of your videos get very, very long, don't they? And you know what? They do. But I don't intend to make them that way. Every video I set out typically to be around 4 parts, maybe 30 minutes, and my videos that have performed the best with the click-through rate typically do end up around that time. But sometimes you just find more and more and more to talk about, and Austin Jones is the Pandora's box that once opened released all hell upon the world. What is this hell? Well, we had our warning. He said he'd learn. He was in a dark place, and suddenly he was at the peak of his success. So let me set the scene. It was August 2016, approximately 1 month after Jones had released his a cappella version of I Write Sins, Not Tragedies by Panic at the Disco. This video was performing well, and his other video prior to that, Welcome to the Black Parade, was also incredibly successful. And of course, even if you're successful, you can be in a dark place. I completely understand that. But at the same time, this should prove that certain circumstances that he cited as present in his previous explanation were no longer there, and he knows better at this point. He had denounced his actions. And this followed through to May 2017, when he was achieving continued success with his a cappella performances. There is no excuse. And this is the thing, the following details that we should note don't just show how selfish he was in the past, how he was only doing it for himself, but open a whole new dimension of this messed up, cruel, sadistic person. This is the guy who apologized and moved past it. And let me make this clear, these court cases bring forward 2 new victims. Victim A in 2017, May, and Victim B in August 2016, the 2 previous scenarios that I was explaining. So let's talk about the details, which are very worrying. What really highlights his incredibly perverted nature was the fact that he always seemed obsessed with his fans being 14, to the point where he would actually make sure they would say out their age, would wear more suggestive clothing, and even encourage the people to stay up, even if they had school the next day. After all, who cares about school? Even when, in this instance, Victim A was tired, Jones pressed on. She said she was gonna pass out, and Jones demanded that she take it seriously. Austin needs his kicks after all, but alas, no clapping. Damn underwear. So far, this is legitimately disgusting. The way that Jones is completely disregarding this person's actual life and placing his own desires above all else, this is his priority. A complete disregard for anyone else's humanity to pursue the goal of his own twisted fulfillment. He can't even wait a night. However, what happens next is unbelievably bad, and I would recommend strapping in for this part. Jones moves the conversation into very explicit territory, creating discussion about boners and whether this girl has the capacity to deliver this. I will not dwell on this for too long, but it has to be acknowledged, so I can now comment on how much of an awful person he really is. I can't emphasize that enough, because even when the conversation moves in this direction, deplorably, he's still manipulating the environment and using his dissatisfaction as cause to move the conversation down a more graphic road. Basically, it's not provocative enough, so he can't pop a boner. If the old video of him talking about how horny he wasn't enough admission that his intention for gathering these videos is quite clear, this person was 14 years old. 14. It's perverted, it's messed up, it's enraging. In Victim A's case, there were multiple videos in which the person revealed their private parts and declared their age, out of the constant lingering fear that they were somewhat obliged to this cretin, in case he went and found anyone else, because he inadvertently degraded people by holding his power over them, which basically made them feel like they had to do these things to please him. And the continual self-reference to age shows that this was where Austin's preferences lay. Austin wasn't just targeting fans who happened to be 14, he was specifically targeting 14-year-olds. Which leads us to our next case, Victim B. Victim B is a lot like Victim A, 14. But Austin wouldn't have you believe that. He once again dances into the DMs, acting like it's an honor that this person has been blessed by his presence. He really shouldn't be doing this, you know, the vagabond. Jones tells her how lucky she is. She says how much of a fan she is. Jones tells her that she'll have to keep proving she's his biggest fan if she wants to win the Austin Jones lottery and have a chance of sucking his dick. Apparently, sucking dick is correlated to being a fan of people. I'm a fan of a lot of people then. And this usual stick ensued. She didn't want to do it. Jones called into question her official status as his biggest fan and used it as blackmail into making this mine objectify themselves and perform acts to satisfy the rocket in his pocket. And that's what's most uncomfortable. It's how he continues to speak to her in this juvenile way, acknowledging she's a child through this condescending tone. Go on, you can do it. Shake that ass. Wow, you get 10 gold stars. That's so funny and wacky. You can see it all here. I'll link it in the pinned comment if you're still interested. Jones continuously pressures this person because he can't see their anus, and I feel unclean just saying that. That continuous cycle, and I mean some of the quotes speak for themselves. Apparently, that's a sign of caring now. How lucky she is. And the further reports just speak for themselves. It is legitimately repulsive, and it's quite sensational that someone would really squander all that talent for a few predatory kicks. And let's be clear, Austin Jones positioned himself in a place where he could do this, but it's clear it comes from a place where he lacks self-control, because no one with any level of restraint, regardless of their twisted desires, throws away an unbelievably successful career for jail time. He clearly had the worst combination of determination and arrogance. He's not necessarily stupid, he's clearly good at manipulating his environments in the moment, but he clearly values the protection that his industry provides far too much as this sort of get out of jail free card. But when you turn into a liability, they'll be the first ones to throw you under the bus. And honestly, I wouldn't mind the bus reversing back over you after what you've done to these poor people. And it should have been clear that he couldn't control himself after the run of exposed content. When I first heard about this incident, I thought to myself, what an absolute tool. Imagine having all of that influence and pursuing 14-year-olds. But it should be clear that their age was part of the appeal, and he thought his power could negate anything that came his way. Fortunately, it didn't, and justice has finally been served. It's hard to look into a person's mind and understand exactly what they were thinking during the incident. However, Jones's borderline sociopathic exploitation of power should say more than enough about the sentencing that he deserves. This was cold, cruel, and calculated, and he needs to take a nice, long trip to the slammer. And with that in mind, I would like to wrap this all up finally. Some people have to go, and Austin Jones was one of them. He had proved himself not capable of handling power, and people even gave him a second chance, whether they actually knew it or not, and he threw it away. He was a nasty person who had dangerous desires and clearly chose not to control them. And second time around, he couldn't hide behind the quote hard times argument. He knew what he was doing. He may be an idiot in some ways, but it's clearly not a Jekyll and Hyde situation. Eventually, YouTube did remove his channel. At first, they declined to do it, saying that it wasn't attached to the instance enough. And although I do feel strongly in some instances about separating the art from the artist, and I want to make it clear that I don't think some criminals having YouTube channels is inherently destructive. In fact, I'm sure YouTube has helped some people move away from certain dangerous activities. But the problem here is that his crimes are inextricably linked to the power that he has obtained through YouTube. And if his sentence is shorter than we expect it to be for any reason, and he comes back to YouTube, he can't have that opportunity. Much of the footage I have found today can be found elsewhere. If you found unique enjoyment in his music, I can't take that away from you. I'd be a hypocrite if I tried to. There are plenty of bad people who've made songs that I have an emotional connection to, and people could never take away from me. But at the same time, as talented as he is, I feel that he has proven himself not capable of personally handling that power. So it's quite clear that he doesn't deserve his channel, nor his fan base, nor anything associated with it. Hopefully his sentence will prevent that, but you can never make any guarantees. And that's the thing with talented people. Even if they do provide something that might be considered irreplaceable in some aspects, it certainly doesn't overshadow the lives they could ruin through their rather selfish actions. And that's one of the most disheartening things about the industry, especially with regards to music. He'd done this terrible thing, and people welcomed him back. They looked at the evidence, the 2015 evidence, they looked at it in the eye, and they were like, this is fine. I have no doubt that many people were aware of his behavior, but because they received some sort of benefit from his presence, they decided that actually it wasn't worth addressing, much more just easy to sweep under the carpet. On top of this led to people who actually called it out, being attacked and threatened by individuals who clearly had a stake in Austin's success, alienating themselves from the victims and denying the severity of these scenarios themselves. By telling them that he had chosen them to speak to out of everyone and making them feel, quote, special, Jones tended to make people feel like their instant with him was isolated, and therefore many people would maybe dismiss it as him having a funny 5 minutes or feel reluctant to come forward as a sole witness to what he was doing. And this is why it initially took so long to corroborate accounts and actively took another person with actual respect from the community to come forward. And even then, he was doubted and attacked by an industry that wanted to forgive someone who should have known better. And even if he was sorry, he shouldn't have been doing any tours and meet and greets with minors at all. It was unbelievable how many people felt it appropriate to place someone who quite clearly had an instinctive attraction to a certain demographic in control of members of that demographic. It would be like hiring a nonce as a babysitter. It doesn't matter if they're repentant, you still shouldn't actively leave them in the vicinity of something that activates their instincts. A high majority of young people are vulnerable, whether they're 4 or 14, because they haven't reached the peak of decision making. I'm far from the person I was when I was 14, and I'm thankful that I wasn't really invested in the internet the same way I am today, because honestly, I'm not quite sure how I would have coped with it. It's hard to put these sorts of crimes on a spectrum, because anything involving exploitation of minors is absolutely horrific. But as soliciting of such photos goes, this is definitely one of the worst cases, predominantly because he completely wages that power in an absolutely obscene manner, readily ruining these people's lives for a quick kick. You have to make sure that you do not become attached to people like Austin Jones. However, unlike the Budday, Austin Jones could be considered attractive in some fashions, and on top of the fact that he was also talented, this gave him immense power over his fans. As fans, it's so important to realize that having your own identity is more important than mindlessly indoctrinating yourself in an idol. Am I saying that you shouldn't have idols? Of course not. Feel free to go and love whoever you want to love, especially if it's me. What I'm saying is that you have to be critical, and that's dangerous when you look at some of these stands. They would give up their organs for some of the people they support. And when you tie yourself to something so unconditionally, you open yourself up to exploitation, because they know they can do anything and you'll remain loyal. It's always about being able to take a step back and calling them out, about being able to see someone like Austin's actions for what they are. Eventually, people did see it in Austin's case. And thanks to social media and actual records, people managed to properly bring these cases forward. And hopefully it won't be too long until he's serving some real jail time and isn't a danger to anyone else. Unfortunately, this could and should have been dealt with earlier, and there are people who are responsible for that. The story of Austin Jones is a story of manipulation in many ways. I want to make it abundantly clear that a lot of the techniques that he used in his videos are the exact same techniques that might be used by people with genuine intent to convey a message. There are many people who sit down and explain their actions in an honest manner. However, in the context of the situation, it becomes quite clear that what he said was not the truth. And even if it was, he clearly consciously used it as an excuse rather than actually believing it as a sincere retrospective analysis of his actions. He doesn't have the capacity to be sincere. You have to pay close attention and extract the facts in these situations. Dealing with serious allegations here, there isn't room for leverage, and people should have identified that when the DMs originally surfaced, that he was transparently taking advantage of people, suggesting that they weren't his biggest fan for not twerking for them. That's not fun and games. People seem to overlook how genuinely disgusting a lot of his language was, and how that should have indicated that he was a nasty, nasty cretin, even with what he was demanding. I hope he goes away for a very long time. It's clear that he has failed to learn from what he likes to call his mistakes. What are your thoughts on the situation? I would love to hear them in the comment section below. I have to give a massive, huge shout out to my editors. this was a long one, my longest one for a while, I think. I really do hope this was not the most fun to write and record, but we did it. We got there. I also have to give a shout out to my Patreons on the board right now. Fantastic, lovely people. Keep up the great work. And on top of that, I have to give a special shout out to Colin, my lovely $50 Patreon. Thank you so much, Colin. I have to give a shout out to Some Hullabaloo, another great $50 Patreon. Thank you so much. Lots of love. Also, massive thank you to Evening Steel, to another $50 Patreon who donated fairly late on in the last month, so I had to slip this little section in. Thank you so much. I have to give a shout out to Ryan, who is a $100 Patreon. I mean, respect the hustle, man. And Brandon, who is a $100 Patreon. Truly, I am truly blessed by all of you. If you want to find me, you can reach me on Twitter at The Right Opinion. You can reach me on Facebook too. You can reach me on Discord as well. I'm all there. Anyway, I hope you're having a lovely day or night or whatever when you watch this video. I'm going to pass out. So, I'm The Right Opinion, and I will see you in the next one.